talk is on writing testable code. I don't know why I'm looking up there. It's down here in front of me. So why writing testable code? I'll get to that in a bit. I'm a senior solutions developer with a company called Leading Edge. There. I also have my own business, Code Squid, where I do a lot of mentoring and those kind of things as well. Okay. And let's see where we're at here. So why write testable code? I like the stories. Okay. This is a slide. You can read that. Okay. First company I worked with where I got into dev work, I had a chance to write some amazing code. I started with jQuery, worked my way up to some really fun tools like AngularJS. I saw the start of React and that kind of a thing. But I was also in an organization with a boss who wanted code out the door as fast as possible. And over a 6-year window, I wrote 3 unit tests. Okay. Now, how many have written unit tests at work? How many really understand the value of those unit tests at work? It's okay if you say no. Okay, about half. The hands are like halfway down for those who can't see it. What I saw in that last year that I was there writing code was I was spending about 80%, 85% of my time fixing my code, fixing the code I'd written over the last 5.5 years. I had these small little things. I mean, we weren't talking big stuff. We were talking little tiny, +1 kind of stuff, really annoying little ones. And I left there. I was getting bored, okay? I like to create things, not tweak things. That's one of the things I learned about myself. And the next organization I was with, I got to write a scripting language, replicating one that was on a mainframe in the browser. I don't know how often you get to write a language. I get to write it. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. But the first iteration worked. Wasn't exciting, but it worked. And I went to my employers and I said, I need to rework this because I was writing it for a client. And what I had written was not pretty by any stretch of the imagination. And I wasn't proud of it. I wanted to rebuild it, right? They asked me what I needed and I told them how much time it was going to take. And they agreed to it. Part of the reason I'm still there, they agreed to give me 2 months to rebuild this thing from the ground up. Rebuilt it from the ground up, 180,000 lines of code, 3,000 unit tests. Okay, the entire remainder of the project had 2,800. Okay, still doesn't mean a lot until you think about the fact that one of the facts you guys don't know is that code went into production, and over the next 2 years that I was at the client, we had 3 reported bugs. Okay, over 180,000 lines of code that was used regularly and heavily. Okay, 2 of those were missed requirements. Not my fault if you tell me variable length is 12 and it should be 25, right? I mean, it's fixable. But 3 bugs. Okay, to me, it really showed me the value of unit tests, showed me the value of integration tests. Okay, I wasn't dealing much with end-to-end QA level testing and that kind of stuff. Okay, so I talk about here embracing testability, not just catching bugs. What we're talking mostly is fostering that culture of quality, right? Tests are about quality, okay? Key characteristics, modularity, clarity, independence, right? Code has to be organized. And when we say discrete units, I learned that in college. I didn't have a clue what that meant until 25 years later when I got a chance to actually write code professionally, right? It needs to be short enough that you can evaluate what it means. Okay, when I walk into a client and I look at a class in Java that's 6,000 lines long, right? How many in this room are going to understand 6,000 lines? I mean, yeah, if you work there for 10 years, maybe. There's a whole team dedicated to that one project. I can't name the client, sorry. It's not very modular, right? Testing in that case, how do we test that? In that case, we were telling them, as you go to work on those 3 lines that you have to tweak, pull that out into its own class. Eventually, you start to group those together. You test that stuff that you're changing, right? It's small changes. They've now been tweaking that one class for 5 years. I think they're about 60%. That's not bad, right? That's pretty significant improvement for something that would take you 10 years to really understand, right? They have a dedicated team for that. Those folks aren't going anywhere. Clarity. Code is understandable. I think that leans right into that, right? If I can't read that and reason about it easily, how am I going to test it? Okay. And then independence, code and isolation. So what we're talking about here is your code shouldn't be knowing that there's something else out there that has to reach out to and use, right? Those global variables, those parent level variables. And JavaScript is one of the really nice ones that lets you use global variables all over the place, and you can really mess up an application using, right? So talk's fun, but let's look at some code, right? We're developers. This is much more fun to look at than a slide that says things should be modular, right? So this is some code that I've written along the way, and actually getKVList is a function that I use. Okay, I've been deep into Cloudflare for the last year, and I'm getting a list from a key vault. Okay, I treat the key vault like a document database. All right, I pass it a host name, I pass it the return original. In this case, do we want the original data as well as the modified data? Okay, and then we have this path we create, and we have this URL. And this is a general rework of what I did. It's not the exact client code that I use, but it's pretty close. And we wrap it in a promise. Yes, I am using old school, wrap it in a promise. And we have response on data, response on error, response on end. We have an else down there on rejected response with status codes. We'll have a fun story about status codes if we get to it, but we probably won't. Then we have another error rejection down here. We end. And this is really hard to really figure out what's going on, right? I mean, there's a reason we got rid of promises. Okay, we didn't get rid of them. We wrapped them in a way that they're easier to understand, to reason about. Okay. At the same time, I look at this, and my first thought is, how in the world am I going to write a test? Okay, and then my second question is, how am I going to write enough tests to cover everything that's going on in here? Right? We have data getting received, we have error handling, we have end state, which has an if structure inside that. Inside there, we run this extracted with the process KV list. We resolve with a ternary condition inside there. And we have another error out here that we handle. And guess what? There's more code down below. That's a lot of paths through that code with promises in the mix, right? Asynchronous activity. This is kind of ugly. Okay, first refactor I did, just to kind of see if we can clean this up a little bit, is, oh, it scrolled down on me. We have our getKVList here, and now we get the path, we get the options. We have a promise, the resolve rejects, and it hands off to the list promise, binding in some variables as it passes through. I can see that that's a lot easier to test now than what we looked at first. Right? As I look at this next one down here, which is the handle getKVList promise, it's firing off an HTTP request. And it's binding in the request down here, it's passing it on, right? After we've made the request, it's passing the response through to something else. Okay, so this is just handing off a request. Pretty easy to test that, right? We're breaking these chunks down, right? So we're handling that request. Here's where we do our data error end. So now I've got 3 things to test on. It's a lot in terms of writing unit tests, but it's not horrible. Okay, and then it starts to get a little ugly down here on the on end. But it's really not too bad because it's 2 conditions, although we do have the ternary hiding in the middle of that. And very simple functionality for the URL and the list. But I was starting to simplify because what we want to show you is I started to break it out. Okay. And then after doing the redesign, the refactor, I decided to do a redesign. They gave me a timer, it's not moving. I'm looking at the time, it's like, oh, 25 minutes. I got a lot of time to go, guys. All right. So for those of you that haven't seen async await, now, unfortunately, my browser didn't pick up really well and show us the awaits. They're in blue over there right next to the any's. This is a lot easier to read and reason about. And I can see here real quick, I've got a fetch, I've got a response, I got this process KV list that I could mock really easily. I got the return literal that has ternaries. I have a try catch. So I have 2 things to test there. So I've got 4 paths through. Just by shifting this to async await, taking the promises out, hiding the promises, Probably a better way to put it. Okay. That's a pretty hefty change in how we observe that code and start to think about how do we test that code. Okay. So one of the things you run into in class-based systems is building systems where the constructor does a lot of work. And I'm going to look down here because that is really narrow on my vision up there. So our test setup, okay, we're doing a lot of work in the constructor. Anybody here written Angular? Ooh, more than I expected. Cool, awesome, I love Angular. Okay, and they're starting to get rid of the need for the constructor, which I think is actually kind of cool. I really haven't dug into what that does to my tests. It kind of feels a little awkward, but it hasn't changed them too much yet. However, there's a tendency to do a lot of work up there, right? Fire off some initializer or something like that instead of using the on init. I've done that a few times in the past and gone back and refactored my code, but you can do too much in your initializer, okay? Things to watch for, got a list over there. You can read that, nothing complicated there, right? You've got to look at how hard it is to read and reason about that constructor. Okay, if it's not just a couple set of configuration items, okay, Angular we do, for those that haven't done Angular, a couple of things that you'll do in there is you hook into your observables or you hook into your whatever your state layer is. Okay, so now we have the signals in there as well. You hook something in there so it knows what to do with those when they change. Okay, it's just an initializer, right? If I were telling it to actually start to do more beyond that, then I have to think about shifting things around. Now, my examples here, tried to make them easy to reason about. Okay, so we have this house class, and it has a kitchen that gets newed up. Okay, inside the constructor, we're adding a bedroom. Okay, and this is, as you can see by the name of the file, hard to test. Let's see why. Here, we're going to look at some tests. Okay, and yeah, watch my tongue. All right. So let's look at test. All right, so here, what do? We have to, before each, we have to new up a house. Okay, oh, okay. That seems okay, because what can I do? I can probably mock some things. All I'm doing is I'm newing up the house, right? Why is this hard to test? Do you think? Bedroom is external to this. Kitchen is external to it, right? Mocking that becomes difficult because I have to grab a hold of the already existing, when this file loads, bedroom and kitchen before I can do anything with them, okay? So if we shift into something that's a little more flexible, in this case, I still have the kitchen and bedroom, but I'm passing them into the constructor in a way that I can then assign them. I don't care where they come from, what they are, right? In the previous example, those are predefined values. Somewhere they came into the system, they're global values, right? So here, we've taken the work off of our constructor. There's nothing newed up, okay? So our test becomes much easier to do. We create our mock kitchen or mock bedroom. We new it up, we pass them in, and then we can test things. We can test that they were properly assigned. Okay, since I'm not using TypeScript there, I could have sent any value. It didn't really have to be a newed up class. Okay. Oh, we got time. Yes. All right. Now I'm really behind. Okay. And why did that move? That did move. Okay, so another example of that, we're going to skip that. All right. Now I know I'm behind on time. We're going to skip forward. Collaborators. All right. Collaborators are objects that, I love this kitchen sink idea, right? Things that do all those extra little odd things that you don't want to deal with right there in that class. It don't seem to fit, okay? There are those other things that you have to get a hold of or pass in or pass out. And it's always fun when it's like you have to pass a function in so the function will fire. So the outside one knows, right? Front end, we do that with components all the time. It's really annoying. I don't like it. You're chaining things, right? And the deeper it goes, the worse it gets, the harder it is to manage, okay? And yes, I'm primarily front end. Back end, you guys do this stuff too, I've seen. All right. Here's a sales tax calculator, and we're properly setting up our taxable on there. And then we have this sales tax where we're getting an address, we're getting a subtotal off an invoice, we're doing a calculation in here. Doesn't look horrible. Okay. we're returning an amount times taxable get tax rate address, which means we have this get tax rate from somewhere off of tax table, which was passed in. So we know the passed in has a get. We have this get address that was passed in that somehow gives us the subtotal off an invoice. Okay, this is some really weird stuff if I'm just looking at this code going, how do I test it? Right? There's all these kind of like almost imaginary things sitting out there somewhere that I have to deal with. Okay. As I look at this from a test perspective, yeah, I can set some things up. I create this taxable that I can pass in. I'm passing in data and hopefully I get the right answer at the end with my magic number at the end. I do have another talk I talk about magic numbers. But can we do this simpler? Can we get a tax rate off of our tax table? All right. Yes, it's still kind of a magic thing coming in, but the logic to see what I'm doing here, I've moved that calculation back over to this class we're passing through. Okay. Makes the logic and testing here significantly easier just by moving things around where they should be in many cases. Instead of doing that calculation in that class, we're doing it in that external one as it comes in. And you can see this test is significantly easier to deal with. Based off that address, our tax rate should be, right? I mean, it's easy to read and understand. Nothing complicated there. And okay, we skip through the second row. Oh, we got lots of collaborators. Okay, and then brittle state, singletons. Okay. So brittle comes with the global states, with singletons, with things that stand out, right? They obscure meaning. All right. Global state will always come back to bite you. Okay. I do like this spooky action at a distance, the definition that came through here. When we're running our test suite, our global state mutates from one test and changes in another, right? Has anybody ever run a test suite and everything works fine? And then you go back and you say, ooh, change that so that it runs them out of order, and watched hundreds of failures come through. Yeah. This is where spooky action at distance comes in. Something you've done in a previous test is allowing the next one to pass. Right? Odds are you've changed something outside of that test suite in a way that the next one knows what it should be. And it's, I don't know about you, it's kind of almost horrifying to chase down. I mean, usually I catch this and it's like, okay, we need to stop for a sprint and fix the test, right? And find out where all these are coming from. And it's not always easy to track down. These are scary to find sometimes, okay? Okay, boring, exciting, I don't know. However you want to promote it, I think it's exciting. Spooky action at a distance, okay? It generally only, it says only, and I really don't like the word only, and I probably should take it out of this deck. I've only seen it happen when you're dealing with global state. Okay, are there other ways to have it happen? Have these spooky at a distance happen? Yeah, it's possible. Okay, but your code is no longer, your tests are no longer running isolated. That's where that dependency is coming from. Okay. And yes, forces, this is where I cringe, forces developers to read every line of code to understand the potential interactions. I mean, you do. You've got to not only dig through your code to figure out where it might be coming from, you're digging through your test suite code to figure out where it should come from. Every line of code. All right. Lowers productivity. Yeah, when you're going to stop for 2 weeks just to fix tests that should be working, that's a problem. Doesn't mean the original tests were bad tests, but they have dependencies that they shouldn't have, or a dependency that needs reset somewhere along the way. Okay. And I do like the last one. Confuses new team members. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't matter how experienced you are. When you see those tests start to fail when they shouldn't fail, it's not a good day, right? So what are we looking at here? I've got a train schedule, finding the next train, and we're checking to see if the track is closed. Okay. Why is that hard to test? I don't know. Well, first of all, we don't have an is closed in here. I'm assuming there's one down there somewhere, right? But it's calling. It's the status checker it's calling. We haven't passed that in. Okay. How are we testing this? Well, okay, we got schedules. We're setting up our new train schedules. And somewhere in here, we have to do this schedules find next train, and we're expecting it not to be null, right? Yeah. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. He's just moving. All right, cool. I'm like, how do we get a question here? In this case, I know a bad response is null, but I'm not checking for a good response, right? I've had to throw that null in once or twice, and I always like, it feels mushy, right? I expect something to be there. I don't know what it is. That should be telling you something's off, right? Just that thought process. So what have we done? We now have an is closed in a checker wrapper, okay? And it's using the track status checker is closed. So we've essentially wrapped that global in this particular case. Why would we wrap the global? It'll still work, right? We're wrapping the global, we're passing it in so we can use it. At the same time, I can mock it for the test. Is this the best way to do it? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the size of the system. I would assume a company that's doing train schedules, that's pretty hefty software. And I don't want to go changing it too radically, right? Because this is trains and that's a lot of weight to be moving around. And I really don't want to have trains going bump in the night, right? So can I wrap this track status checker in a way that when I write my test for this code down here, the train schedules, I can correctly mock it out, okay? I think that's why I picked trains for this, okay? And so in the before each, I'm mocking out my wrapper so that I can test this. Now, I did leave the to be null in there, but I probably should change that, right? Okay? Those weird, nebulous, scary outside things that exist in almost every system that's been around for any length of time. So I've got to go really fast because I have 3 minutes. When is global state okay? Okay? When you're referencing some constant, okay? Something that should be immutable, right? In this case, it's a URL. Where are your endpoints, right? That's not a bad one to have a constant somewhere that you reference, all right? But you have to understand that that can't mutate. So in this case, it's a constant, right? I know we do constants in other languages in different ways. This is JavaScript. Shouldn't change, right? We used to use var. Everything could change in JavaScript. It's a scary thing, okay? When it doesn't change, it's much harder to have that mutate and impact your tests. Okay, classes can do too much. And as I have 2 minutes left, we're not going to talk much about that. Let's see. Large span of, yeah. Classes do too much. They're too big, right? If I go much past 3 screens on a class, I'm starting to think, do I break it down? Now, if my screen is rotated sideways, it's 2 screens. Okay, yes. I've had that question, okay. All right, and it becomes hard to hand off. Get to 6,000 lines, probably should be shot on that one, okay? Takes a lot to fix it, okay? Break them up. You know, good naming conventions. I probably shouldn't have to say that, but for testing. All right, so we've gone over a lot of stuff. One of the thoughts that I had as I was talking to folks and things like that too is one of the things I don't talk about here in writing testable code. You know, I'm a front-end developer, so I do lean into that a little bit. So back-end folks, this isn't going to help you as much, but if you help the front-end folks, it's useful. Is, you know, writing your code in such a way that other people that are going to test can handle it too. Back-end folks, it fits for like integration level testing, right? So when they're doing API testing and it's a QA team reaching in, can you put things together in a way that makes their lives a little bit easier? Front-end, we're always taught not to use IDs, right? I was taught that. Okay. However, what does my QA grab onto? I don't want them to use a class. It's too generic. You're going to get 50 of them. Which one do they want? Right? If I can name those IDs on the row they're on, is it okay to put that in there for testing purposes? I think it's absolutely okay. Right? So we need to start thinking about that, not just what we're able to test, but what others are. Now, I believe the right side is my review. Okay, so it's a survey. You can go in, you can review. It's not for the conference. I'm the only one who gets review, so please fill something out there. The left side is, and for those online, I think you get this one too, is my QR code for the slide deck for this. It's the PDF. I was supposed to have turned it in. I'll probably be turning it in here to Danny sometime tonight or tomorrow morning. Supposed to be there a week ago. Sorry, it's not there. So we have no time left. Sorry, no questions out in the hall. Thanks, guys.